The more mature someone is, the more what they do, what they think, the values they hold, owe more to their own work, their own sifting, their own editing, than it does to the context that they were born into.
Recently, I've noticed that there's more artists who are in their 30s and 40s and beyond who are now following the work that I put out on this channel. And for that reason, I'm starting this 3-part series focused purely around the ideas of pursuing your passion after 30.
I mean, we make things because we're interested in them, and there is this bit at the end of it where you have to kind of, show your work to mummy and daddy, but that's not the reason why we do it.
I collected some really interesting discussion and clips, and I wanted to start by talking about ideas around ownership, looking at a simple question that can allow us to assert more value and drive around our creative work, and the unfashionably cheesy but important concept of self-belief.
If it's in my hands, I'm going to do it. I have no doubt in my mind. I could be wrong. I'm sure my photography is not so great sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm sure somebody else could, maybe somebody do a better job, but I don't buy it.
But do you worry about your work being perfect before you put it out in front of millions of people?
It always is. I mean, I'm sounding like a pompous jackass, just on purpose. But I'm trying to make a point, and that point is I'm very confident.
If you like the work that I do here, do consider coming and signing up to the free Creative Minds newsletter. I don't send you any bullshit, and there's a lot of writing that I put out exclusively through there, as well as the full-length interviews with artists from this community that I do as well. And just before we jump into today's video, a quick shout out to the sponsor here, which is Surfshark. I've used a VPN myself on my laptop and my phone for a couple of years now, and it's an easy and simple way to give you a bit more peace of mind around your privacy online, protecting your data, and having the benefit of allowing you to access streaming services content that would otherwise be locked in your country. When it comes to internet privacy, I feel quite strongly about how people who might be more vulnerable to becoming paranoid around stuff like that shouldn't be pushed into buying stuff through that sense of paranoia. My own approach to internet security is to take the steps that I can afford to practically move towards the best practice I can. And yet, if you can afford it, then having a trusted VPN like Surfshark is a great step to do that. In comparison to its competitors, Surfshark offers a no-nonsense, great value, great on-privacy offer. Unlike a lot of competitors, it's going to give you the ability to use unlimited devices with your account, and being based in the Netherlands, where there aren't any data retention laws, then the practice around not storing and keeping your online data lifts it above many other popular offers. So go to surfshark.com/creative minds or use code creative minds at the checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. Thanks to Surfshark and the sponsors. I couldn't make these videos without them. And with that said, let's jump back into the piece here.
One of the journeys that I think we all are on is to start to separate out a little bit. Well, what I can understand there's a lot in me that was just put there by society, by the context in which I was born. Which of those bits do I want to keep or focus on, and which of those bits do not fully represent, my values, my considered choices, etc. And this is where life gets interesting, because people start to say things like, well, where I come from, normal meant ... But the more I think about it, the more I'm reflecting on who I really am, the more I want to ditch that and that and that. It's as a form of editing process.
One of the overarching setups for this whole series comes around the ideas of self-ownership and how we justify the value of our creative work to ourselves. Because it's a fact, the older we get, the more responsibilities we are usually going to gather, and a serious commitment to creative practice as a priority in our lives can start to be surrounded by a bunch of internal and external questioning around the value of this stuff that we're spending time on.
Nobody else was responsible for my life other than me. There was nobody trying to hold me back. There was nobody trying to help me forward. Once I'd taken responsibility for everything, I found that everything started to work just fine.
These voices of self-doubt if left unchecked and allowed to circle around us, possibly unclearly defined, they can lead to feelings of stuckness or deflation or overwhelm that can end up draining the passion from the things that we actually care about engaging with in our creative practice.
When I talk to other potters about what I do, they say that I don't work enough in the tradition. I feel like a fugitive. When I think about myself in relationship to the kind of complex political environment, I feel like a fugitive. And if there are moments in the work where I'm attempting to release myself from one medium and free myself into this other thing, and that freeing requires that you leave a thing that has held you, that has bound you, and that freedom requires effort to run.
The journey from being young into a more mature state, and I'm not saying I'm a master of this, this is a road for everyone, is going to be a journey of becoming more and more aware of those stories and things we've gathered that actually end up taking away from how we want to live our life as an adult. I'm going to play a clip from an artist in a minute, Pope.l, speaking about his work and the level of commitment he finds important to hold on to in it. And in the clip, he talks about how the commitment to his work was crystallized in a moment where he was asked by someone important in his life to clearly define that commitment.
Well, you have to give up something. You have to give up your peace of mind, because when you're on the street like that, you're more prey to something happening to you that could be a problem. I don't know if that's brave or stupid. When I told my mother, she thought it was more stupid and didn't refrain from telling me so. She had a good criticism. She said, "What is the point of this?" And it was really direct and clear. What is the point of you risking this? And the interesting thing was, it was a really great conversation about me being clear about my intentions. But it was my mom doing the critique.
I love this example because by being faced with this direct challenge by one of the key people in his life, this artist was really forced to make a choice and step into that adult self, clarify why he did what he did, and take ownership of it. Where the younger self might have built an antagonistic relationship, unconsciously or consciously, with those voices that surround us and we feel are trying to take our time or control how we live our lives. As an adult, we can recognize the truth, which is that any power we're given to that is actually coming from our own inability to take ownership for how we actually want to spend our lives.
I remember my mother saying to me when I was perhaps 27, 28, and I think I just had my first show in Copenhagen. It was one of the first shows at a commercial gallery I'd done with Nikolai Wallner. And she's like, "Oh, so you've been to Denmark, what were you doing there?" And I said I had an exhibition. She said, "Oh, that's nice, what were you exhibiting?" I was drawing. So, "Oh, so what happens to the drawings?" And I was like, "Oh, people buy them." And she was like, "Why?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess you need to ask them that question. I guess they like them. But what would they do with them?" I said, "They put them in a frame and have them in their home on the wall." And she was like, "Oh, that's strange, isn't it?" Like, yeah, I guess it is in a way. But that sort of illustrated the fact that my parents really didn't register that I had become at that point a professional artist, and that's what I hopefully was going to do.
When you reach 35, 45, 55, if you're still feeling disempowered in your creative work because your secondary school art teacher didn't believe in you enough, then it's probably time to get some distance from that and start to take responsibility for your own conception and definition of how much you can achieve. This necessity to self-define and separate ourselves from some of the baggage and defeatist narratives that we might be carrying from our younger lives brings me to the final point I want to make in this first video here, which is around the idea of self-belief.
Why is it important to do like performance in public? It isn't really. I mean, who the fuck cares if you do performance in public? And I think that was part of it. It's inconsequential. No one gives a fuck, you know, but I do. And I think I wanted to build an audience, you know, and one way to do that was to be in public and to deal with what that means, you know, ridicule from people who see you, or someone who wants to hurt you, or someone who wants to spit on you. So, you know, you go into this, what'd you call it? You make a commitment to not know.
I've spoken in some of my previous work about how having a strong sense of your self-belief and your purpose, why you do this stuff, can allow you to dodge some of the toxic all or nothing narratives that culture loves to spin around creatives and the arts.
We do it because it's interesting. And the most interesting thing about it is actually the making, or the ideas, or the kind of the conversation that Jake and I might have, and the results of those conversations. Everything else is neither here nor there. And I don't really. I mean, journalists tend to not be very intelligent people, and they kind of, you know, they ask questions, or they make statements that are kind of that don't really either don't deserve an answer, or are just so ridiculous that you know you ignore them.
I myself, and I know that a lot of other artists and creatives, might have projects that are going to lead them into a kind of isolated practice and having to work quite a lot on their own sometimes. But in the end, I know myself, and I think a lot of others too, the ends of those projects are often going to be about enriching the ways that we connect with the world, communicate with the world, and yeah, just about living more open, non-judgmental, learning focused lives that are full of more possibility.
So you said that you kind of were able to find opportunities by reaching out to people. Can you talk a little bit more about that process? Because that's something that some people find quite natural to do. Some people sit there and go, I don't know how to connect. I don't know how to get my work out there. So how was that process to you? I
probably emailed everybody there was to email. Because I think it's really important to take yourself out of an isolated practice and turn it into a collaborative one. And I think that makes your work a lot more fulfilling. I think you also realize it's like kind of like user experience, when people start to ask you questions. They're like curious about, well, why did you think about XYZ in a certain way? They'll ask you tough questions and you'll be like, well, you have to figure it out.
In the next video in this series, I want to jump off from this idea of how we build our projects to serve us and think about the creative engines that drive that work for good or bad. In the meantime, please do let me know if any of the ideas in this one have resonated with you, and join the discussion in the comments below there. Thanks to all the paid subscribers who support this work. Do go check out the free newsletter, which is linked below, for some more writing around stuff like this, as well as those full-length interviews with the Creative Minds community artists. And yeah, with all that said, good luck in your own work and speak soon.